We are going to study the late President John Garang. But first of all, I have to tell my viewers of different naming in different countries. In Tanzania, you may find somebody called Wilson Peter or George Peter. Tanzania, it is possible to have two Christian names, maybe because they didn't like tribal names, which would associate somebody with a tribe. In Kenya, people have three names. There is a Christian European name for the non-Muslims, and that is the first name. Then the second name is your name, African name or tribal name. And the third name is your father's name or the son name. I belong to the minority where my father's name comes in the middle. But in most Kenyan names, it's a Christian European name, then your name, then your father or son name. In South Sudan, someone is known by two names, the first two names, and on a few occasions is when the third name is used. For example, the subject of today's discussion is John Garang. On many occasions, he is known as John Garang. But in some occasions, or if we have to refer to his full names, it is John Garang de Mabior. They rarely use the last name. But in Kenya, you'll find they avoid the two names and use the last name, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. Like the current president, he's called Salva Kiir. Everybody knows him as Salva Kiir, but the full names are Salva Kiir Mayardit. You know, I'm a honorary Shilluk. My honorary tribe is Shilluk from Equatoria, a place I am a Shilluk for the purpose of this. John Garang was born on 23rd June 1945 at a place called Wankulei in Twik County, Southern Sudan. Not South Sudan, Southern Sudan, because that time Sudan was one. He was a Dinka by tribe. Spent most of his education in Tanzania. He graduated in Greenley College in Iowa in 1969. But somehow, when he was traveling between Sudan and Tanzania, there was a time when, just before independence, there was a time when he was arrested and jailed in a committee for freedom fighting related activities. And among his cellmates was one Arthur Ochwada from Busia. Now, upon Kenya attaining independence, Ochwada, who was elected as an MP, approached the then Minister for Home Affairs, Jaramogi, full names, Adonijah Obednego Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. He approached him and said that there is a prisoner from Sudan who is wrongly in committee, and he gave the particulars of that prisoner. Adonijah Abednego Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, being the Minister for Home Affairs, in charge of Kenya prisons, released John Garang from prison. That is the time I guess that he went and taught Nyeri Secondary School. Even the time just before he died, he had even visited that school and had promised the school that he will take, as a former teacher there, he'll make efforts to upgrade the school. By bad luck, he died within a short time after saying that. But the school is there. Those viewers who come from Nyeri or who know the full name of the school, kindly place it in our comment section. After graduating, he returned to Sudan and joined the Sudanese army. Shortly after that, he left and joined, he defected and joined the First Anyanya Civil War. And then the reason why Anyanya was there was that Sudan was basically a two-country in one. There was the Arabic North and the African, Christian, and animist South. So the British just imposed to make the two Sudanese be one country. So the Anyanyas started a civil war because of the domineering of the Arab Islam North. And if you are a black Christian animist or anything, you would be treated as a second-class citizen. And even being treated as a second-class citizen was a favor. You would be treated as a slave. So in 1972, there was an agreement in Addis Ababa whereby the then Sudanese president, Jafar al-Numeri, and the Anyanya leader, who was called Joseph Lagu, came and made an agreement. They signed a peace accord. And the peace accord was there to give Southern Sudan, not South Sudan, but Southern Sudan, because the country was still one, to give the Southern Sudan autonomy. But like all other, to give South Sudan an autonomy. And John Garang and other leaders of the Anyanya military wing were reabsorbed into the Sudanese army. They were reabsorbed into Sudanese army. But like all politicians, they only sign when things are hot and they just want to buy time. Hardly had they signed that, they continued with the Arabization and Islamization of the country. Hata mimi najua Kizungu. So Garang was promoted to colonel and was given Garang was promoted to a full colonel, and he was taken to Fort Bering in Georgia for further military courses. While he was there, he undertook and graduated with a PhD in agriculture in the University of Iowa, 1981. He returned back immediately to the Sudanese army, and he was made the deputy director of military research, and he was made a commanding officer of an infantry battalion. Then broke the Second Civil War, or if you want to call it, Second Anyanya War. By early 80s, the government had introduced Sharia law in all regions. Arab language was made the official language in the whole of Sudan. Remember, the Addis Ababa Agreement was made in such a way that South Sudan was given some autonomy. Southern Sudan, not South Sudan. Southern Sudan was given some autonomy. But when that was just on paper and it never happened. Then Garang was sent by the Khartoum government to go and quell the second Anyanya War. He went there and shifted and he formed Sudanese People Liberation Movement. And also it had an armed wing which was called Sudanese People Liberation Army. If you remember very well, African countries during independent time, they had two things. Just like in Uganda we had NRM and we had NRA, National Resistance Movement and National Resistance Army. So earlier, much earlier, Garang had started Sudanese People Liberation Movement with its armed wing called Sudanese People Liberation Army. Now, I want to tell my viewer that currently we have three arms of the Sudanese People Liberation Army, but I'll talk of, there is one called Sudanese People Liberation Movement in the north, meaning this political party plus the political wing was over throughout the country, even in the north. But when the country was split into two, Sudan and Southern Sudan, it was the main SPLA and SPLM formed the government the southern, but the branch that found itself in the north still exists with the same principle, but that one is a part of the Sudanese and they report to Khartoum, but they are called SPLM, Sudanese People Liberation Movement in the north. So if from above you can see that all along, John Garang, from the word go, he wanted a united Sudan. But the Arab in the north pushed him to an extent that SPLM had no option. Through a referendum, SPLM had no alternative but to form a new government of their own. John Garang, even though a Christian, he was a Marxist. But America, through the government of George Bush, sided with him because they did not like the whole country being turned into an Islamic state, where Arabization and Islamization was the norm. So in the year 2005, there was a comprehensive peace agreement which was conducted in Kenya, in Naivasha. But before that, in 2002, behind the scenes, SPLA and the Khartoum government started talks. The Sudanese government, the Khartoum government was headed by Omar al-Bashir. So on 9th January 2005, the comprehensive peace agreement was signed. After the comprehensive peace agreement was signed, John Garang Dimabior became the vice president. There were two. The former vice president of Sudan became the second vice president, and John Garang became the first. He had two positions, just like Tanzania and Zanzibar, where the government, the best example is the Tanzania and Zanzibar, whereby they had the union government and they had the Zanzibar government. So there was the Sudanese government and the semi-autonomous region of Southern Sudan. He was the first vice president of Sudan, and he was the president of the semi-autonomous South. They continued that way for some time, until when a referendum was conducted in southern Sudan, where residents of southern Sudan up to the Nuba Mountain, excluding Nuba Mountains, insisted by overwhelming majority that they secede and form a new government. So when the new government was coming, unfortunately, he used to go around neighboring countries, and he had visited Uganda, had talks with Museveni, but when he left to go back to Juba, the helicopter had an accident and all died in the helicopter. The helicopter was borrowed from the Ugandan military, and as Africans, you see, we say Uganda military, and he was from Uganda. The first person to notice that Garang had died was his widow, because Garang had a satellite phone where he was communicating with his wife, and the wife reached a place where she was trying to call him, but his phone was dead. Why was it dead? When it fell and the helicopter blew up and started burning, it burned up that phone, and so it was registering that it was switched off. Lastly, I can say Garang is the South Sudanese Moses, taking all the people, seeing the Holy Land, but not reaching there. Amen.